I had a very rare privilege to, of course, rare privilege makes it look like something very massive. Of course, it's massive. Business and human rights is very massive, guys. Yeah, yeah. So, I'll just dive right in. Teresa Kramlova, a senior advisor at Rambo, she had this to say from a report that I read from the Rambo. Rambo is a company, European company. She said, too many companies shy away from human rights due diligence because it might reveal risk they would rather not face. But that's precisely the point. Let that sink in for just few seconds. So it makes a whole lot of sense. I would say that across Europe, like business and human rights, it's taking a whole lot of roots. If you look at the Arab countries and of course African countries, you would find that Africa, the Arab world, beginning to make some major readjustments, to business and human rights, and that's also primarily because um, several African countries are beginning to adopt national action policies in business and human rights that look at the tripod of the UNGP that has to do with the state duty to protect, the company's duty to respect. Then we now talk about remedies, remediation mechanisms, and all of that. So back to what Teresa was actually said. When companies don't even know about business and human rights, in my opinion, how can they shy away from it? Because when you talk of Europe, for example, like the awareness is very high. When we talk about the that's the corporate sustainability due diligence directive, you know that there's a lot of awareness. Companies are aware, politicians are even aware of the issues. But when you narrow that down to a lot of African countries, we mainstream human rights in a certain way, but without necessarily knowing that that's what we are basically doing. That actually happens a lot. If you talk to maybe SMEs, for example, there's some level of the deployment of that humanity, the humanity that interfaces with the business to in terms of how companies basically operate. So we see all of that already, but the knowledge about the fact that what companies are actually doing, is in conformity with human rights standard in that sense, it's necessarily not something that people are basically aware of. So I would say that the most important thing when we're having these conversations within the African context is to see that the awareness goes first. Companies need to be aware. What obligations do we have? When we begin to do business either in the oil and gas sector, in the maritime sector, in the agri sector, in the extractive sector, what are the obligations that we have? What are the obligations that we have before we get to a point of not wanting to embrace human rights due diligence within company operations? Do we have the knowledge? So I feel that within the entire life cycle of business and human rights in Africa, of course, in Nigeria, we must push the button of sporadic awareness. That button, that awareness has to go forth first. We need to have the awareness around business and human rights in the first place. Because I was reading a report, a UNDP report. I just played it on my phone in my car. I was driving for over an hour, and I listened to that report via audio. And it had to do with the report was addressing how should businesses engage, in conflict situations. For example, if you think of Nigeria, for example, or you think of the Congo, or you think of any other African country, or maybe Eastern European country, or even Southern American country, where there are pockets of conflict, you would definitely find out that there are also pockets of minerals. Like there's a resource control twist around conflict in a lot of places across the world. So what can businesses do? Businesses that operate in conflict-ridden societies or communities, how can they ensure that they are not complicit with the conflict in itself? How can they ensure that they keep their brand name, their brand value above the threshold of being smeared by, their own participation or their own contribution or their own negligence with what is happening within conflict, areas? That's something that we should begin to think about, because the fact that there's a conflict somewhere necessarily doesn't mean that people should pretend that human rights has ceased to exist for some reason. So it's very, 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 very important that we begin to look at this, because, like Teresa said, the point basically is that companies should not shy away. Do not shy away. Do not shy away from human rights due diligence because you are thinking of, oh, it's going to involve a risk. But we need to know about business and human rights first in the first place. That information needs to be out there. I know that the Human Rights Commission of Nigeria is doing a lot of work. The UNDP as well in Nigeria are doing so much work, just to put out, to fleshing out the discussions. And as that continues to gather momentum, it will be nice for lawyers, professionals. If you work in a boardroom, for example, you're a company secretary, you can slip in that in the agenda of your board. You can slip that in, because how would this information even find its way into the boardrooms? It's the lawyers that are on that boardroom, the company secretaries, they need to take that information there. So that also means that there is need to capture that demography of company secretaries that work in boardrooms where these massive decisions are made. Because a chairman of a company might necessarily not stumble on this. If he doesn't attend a conference on business and human rights, he's not going to stumble on it. So it's the professionals that are in the room that would slide that into the agenda, to see how that companies now realize that it's an obligation. It's an obligation. We cannot continue to think profit only. We have to think profit at the same time, think sustainability, at the same time, think planet, think climate. There are a lot of things to really think about. And it's just so interesting that when we have this mindset of adopting a set of principles that capture profit not beyond human rights, then I can tell you categorically that we will begin to see a lot of changes. And trust me, human rights being infused into your operations, it does a whole lot more good. It does a whole lot more good for your business. So the thinking of this is another layer of regulation, no, it's not necessarily even another layer of regulation. It's not even, I can say at best, we are talking of soft law that prevents you from violating hard law. I don't know how that really sounds, but I know it makes a whole lot of sense. Adopt simple principles, have a human rights policy in your business, see how you can begin to make those little changes beyond the verbosity of, high sounding language and all of that. I think that would really help. There was something else I wanted to really share before we're done with this video, and it's still another quote from the Ramble report, and it says, human rights due diligence is not about being perfect from the very beginning. Like, these are just these words are so soft and so simple and so human. Human rights due diligence is not about being perfect from the beginning. Even if you take a look at yourself, you're not perfect, right? So the expectation is not to see that companies are operating within a perfect value chain or cycle. It is an aspiration. Nobody expects perfection, but we want to see that companies are adopting changes, slight changes that affect the supply chain, that affect the value chain of their businesses, that people can wake up and truly say, wow, this company, this Nigerian company, this is a model of a company. This oil and gas company is a model. This maritime company is a model. This massive agriculture company that deals with thousands of farmers is a model. Imagine when the farmers themselves begin to see themselves as people who are partners within this whole scope of conversations around business and human rights, and they now begin to feel like, this is a good company to work for, because they are feeling the trickle down effect of a company that has mainstreamed human rights into its operations. I believe that you'll be that company. And if you're that massive company in Nigeria, you're a public company, you're a private company, you're doing extremely well in sectors around construction, extractive sector, that's the mining sector, oil and gas, maritime, give us a call. Let's come and show you how how that you can infuse human rights principles within your operations without you necessarily having to think about the fact that the effect of that will be negative to your business, because that's basically not true. Human rights and business, you infusing human rights into your business, imagine the reputational advantage. And of course, something came up not too long ago that had to do with charcoal and the EU coming up with principles or procedures for the import of charcoal from different countries, of course, including Nigeria. The rules are changing. You don't want your charcoal to get into Europe only for it to be sent back because it is on record that your company has fallen short of certain procedures or certain rules. You don't want that to happen. So, what we offer you, what I offer you, what we offer you, what business and human rights would offer you is to plug the problem, to nip the problem in the bud before you launch out, because you don't want that whole media hype. Imagine you're a massive company out there and children are working maybe in your agro company, they are not catered for, or the people who are working there, there's child labor, there's some level of slavery. Oh my God, you don't want that to happen. I'll do another video that deals with, in fact, it had to do with a prominent Nigerian politician and the Slavery Act, I think, in the UK. I'll just talk briefly on that and just to create that nexus so that you can really understand how these things work. Europe is changing. Africa has to change alongside. The world is changing, not just Europe. Even Asia is changing. There's so much around BHR across diverse Asian countries. I know that even in terms of the abuses, we still have pockets of abuse, not just pockets, massive raindrops of abuses across the world. But we have to start from where we are here in Nigeria to see how we can fix the system. That system has to work for you. It has to work for the vulnerable, the downtrodden, and corporates, companies have a huge role to play. And I believe that when companies begin to take that bull by the horn to make sure that they are streamlining human rights into their operations, oh, what a happy day. What a happy day for communities. What a happy day for stakeholders. What a happy day even for the unborn child.